Hello, everybody. It says we're live, so I hope everything is working out. Welcome to the virtual Indie Book Fest. This is the very first panel of the whole weekend, which is very exciting. No pressure or anything. But we are here to talk about contemporary fiction. This panel is called Here and Now. And I have some incredible authors with me who all have books that we can talk about. So to start out, let's all introduce ourselves. So my name is Karen. I am a booktuber. I have a channel called The Audiobook Aficionado that this should be recorded on. And I mostly talk about like a range of middle grade, YA, and adult, and contemporary is my favorite genre. So I'm really excited to be hosting this panel. We can just go down the line and everyone introduce yourself and talk about your book that we're going to be talking about today.
Hi, I'm Donna Miscolta. I live in Seattle. I grew up in Southern California, just south of San Diego. I'm the author of 3 books of fiction. The latest is Living Color, Angie Rubio stories, and it traces the progress, the educational progress of a young girl from throughout school, and sort of looks at the lessons that she learns, well, the life lessons she learns as she progresses through school, and what it's like to be a brown girl in a society that favors neither her race nor gender.
Good morning. My name is Hamour Baika. I'm an Iranian-American author living in near Washington, D.C. My book that we are going to talk about today is my debut novel called On the Enemy's Side. And it's about right after the Iranian Revolution in 1980. It's about a prison guard who starts to have feeling for one of the prisoners, and he's trying to figure out why the guy is in prison and what's happening, and how to develop anything if that's a possibility.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frederick Smith, he, him pronouns. I am based in San Francisco, but today coming in from a hotel room in Michigan. And we've written a novel, Chaz, Lamar, Cruz, and I, called Busy Ain't the Half of It. It's a contemporary male, second chance, friends and lover romance novel with elements of family, found family, savvy teens, and what's been deemed Black excellence. Great to meet everyone.
Good morning for me. I'm in Sacramento, California today. My name is Chaz Cruz, pronouns he or they, and Fred did a great job of talking about, briefly sharing what Busy Ain't the Half of It is about. So I'm excited to be here and to talk more about it. Yeah.
Awesome. So to start out, since this is the virtual Indie Book Fest and everyone here is either a small publisher or independently published, I just wanted to talk about that experience. I feel like there's going to be pros and cons. And I just wanted to hear about like a highlight and potentially a low light of your publishing experience, like a point where you were really glad that you are an independent author, and potentially a point where you were really struggling and something that challenged you in that whole process.
So when I got the offer from Jaded Ibis Press, my publisher, I was thrilled. It's a press whose mission aligns with my values and also the content and themes of Living Color. Jaded Ibis is a feminist press committed to publishing socially engaged literature with an emphasis on the voices of people of color, people with disabilities, and other marginalized voices. And so I'm grateful for the effort they put into sending the book out for interviews and reviews and how they communicate with me throughout the process. And small presses have small staffs, and so there's a limit to what any small press can do. And so there wasn't really anything that surprised me when it came to maybe the difficulties in being with an independent publisher. I already knew that because my previous 2 books are with small presses. Your book is not likely to get a lot of visibility or to be in bookstores across the country unless you have a particular relationship with that bookseller. And that can be hard to do given the number of books that come out every month. So opportunities like this for to talk about our books and to learn about other indie published books are really appreciated. So I will say that at the time I was seeking publication for Live in Color, I was pursuing 2 tracks that overlapped in time. I was querying agents, but that's a long and demoralizing process at times. I mean, there are some people who are able to get an agent within months of querying, and others it takes years. And I'm 68 years old, and I don't have a lot of time to wait for people to come and find me or to make up their mind about me. So that's why I was querying small presses. And I'm so glad that I connected with Jaded Ibis, that they offered me publication, and it's been a great relationship, and I love the books that they put out. So I'm really happy to be with them. And I don't know, in terms of good and bad. I mean, I think it's just good to be to have a place so that the book can be on the world. So very grateful for that.
I'm on the furthest end of the spectrum of indie publishing. I published the book myself, so the editors, the graphic designers, the cover designer, all of those service providers worked directly for me, and the challenge that Donna was just talking about is magnified for a one-man company. It's really difficult to get media. Like, a lot of media outlets are categorically closed to indie books. It's really difficult to get attention and get interviews, get reviews, especially. And then I think that puts all the pressure on me. So if it succeeds or fails, it's all on me. And it's also an interesting challenge to work on. On the positive side, I have complete control to run promotions, to change the price for specific campaigns. And most importantly for me, I wanted to tell the story in a way that is true to the historical facts that existed at the time. And I needed to have complete creative freedom to do that. For example, one of the things that I dealt with when I had critique partners and editors, they consistently told me that I need to change the ages of the characters so that it's clearly adult or clearly YA. And I'm like, if you read the few sentences at the very beginning, you will realize that it's clearly adult. But the individuals who ended up in prison in 1980, many of them were teenagers. So I want to stay true to that fact. I just translated it to Persian, and my Persian editor is like, are you sure you don't want to change this age so that the prisoner is an adult? Because then clearly he had sex as a minor. I'm like, yeah, consensually with another minor. That happens. And I pointed out that, a lot of the prisoners, because she was herself a former political prisoner, that at the time, a lot of prisoners were really young. And I wanted to tell that story and not compromise on those important details. And when it came to graphics and things like that, I was so happy. I'm like, I had several back and forths with my cover designer, and I had a lot of the story, a lot of names, a lot of locations are going to sound foreign to the reader. So I'm like, how can I make this more relatable? So for the hardback edition, I created graphics so that each location is like there is a graphic at the beginning of the chapter, so the reader can more easily realize like this is a different location, it's a different thing, like it's, you know, so that they can understand, like they can follow the story better. So I think that's it for me. Sorry if I spoke too much.
That was great. Currently, Chaz and I are published on Bold Strokes Books, which focuses on quality and diversity in LGBTQ literature. It's a small boutique publishing company, and I've had great experiences with it, with my 3 novels done with Bold Strokes Books. You know, the sense of team, the sense of family, the amount of communication to all the authors, the way that we kind of synchronize our events and support each other, you know, on social media, etc. It really does feel like a family at Bold Strokes Books. However, we also needed to, you know, kind of bring ourselves to the attention, you know, of the, you know, company as well, in terms of what we offer in terms of a unique voice with Black and queer voices. And so several months before the publication of Busy Ain't the Half of It, we had a wonderful meeting with the publicist at Bold Strokes Book, Ruth Sternglantz, who really listened to some of our ideas, helped us kind of craft a way to connect with readers and bookstagrammers and things like that. And so I would say working with an independent publisher for me has been a positive experience. And I just gotta say, I'm always grateful to be in print, because there's so many people who are out there who are continuously querying agents, continuously querying publishers, and really don't get the chances that we've had to even be on a publisher. My journey, actually, my first 2 novels, I was with a larger publisher when I first got published. I was with one of the majors in New York City, and I had a 2-book contract. And then, of course, we know if you don't fulfill the sales and things like that, kind of like music, you get dropped. And that was perfectly fine with me. I had a beautiful experience with Kensington. And when the opportunity arose to, you know, send out again to smaller presses, I said, you know what, I think an LGBTQ focused press is the best home for my work right now. And I understand the work that authors have to do. Like, it's not just the company sending people out. Like, we all are our publicist and our designer, and thinking about what we need to do. And so I've enjoyed working with Bold Strokes Books, and you know, looking forward to more. And I'm so happy that Chaz has been along on a journey, and I invited Chaz in. So Chaz didn't have the same struggles as many of us did in terms of having to query agents and publishers, because one day I walked across the hall, Chaz and I worked together, and I said, Chaz, Bold Strokes Books just emailed me and said they want another novel. I said, do you want to join in? And Chaz said,
I said, absolutely, count me in. And that's how our journey started. That was a great transition, Fred. Thank you. And my sentiments align with Fred, and also Donna, what you shared about working with a smaller independent company. So I feel the same way. So as what Fred said, we also have to do a lot of work with our team to publicize our work and our writing, and we bring ideas of how we can continue the success of our novels, specifically Busy Ain't the Half of It. And so it's been a pleasure thus far, and I won't add anything more because Freddie did a great job. So thank you.
That was great. I mean, that is amazing to hear so many positive things. And the next question, I wanted to focus on contemporary fiction, because that's the theme for this panel. And as somebody who loves contemporary fiction, I think that one of the key elements that really can make a contemporary book that's, you know, a real life story grounded in reality, successful or not, is whether it feels real or not, whether people can, you know, connect to the story and like recognize it as something that could happen. And I think that probably one of the easiest ways to do that is by drawing from your own experiences and your own life. And I was just really curious what you guys kind of do with your writing process. Do you intend to draw from real life experiences? Is that something you're really conscious of? Is that something that happens unintentionally? Or potentially, is that something that you kind of want to separate from your work and you really want to keep, your own life and the lives of your characters separate? How you find that balance and kind of what your process is and your thoughts on that and kind of how that comes through in your books.
Well, I do often draw on personal experiences, but often in a more tangential way. That is, I'll often draw on things I've observed or heard about, because then I have a little more distance from them. I don't recall, or I may not even know the details. And so then I can more easily create a fictional character and fictional circumstances from that little bit of truth that I have found. And I did this for my first 2 books and also with Living Color. And with Living Color, I do admit to having mined my own life for much of what happened to Angie Rubio. But I think I had enough distance from those experiences in terms of time so that I was able to create a character who wasn't me, but who was sort of me psychically. And so I wanted to, because I was close enough to understand the hope and humiliation of those circumstances, and also the self-consciousness and the bravery of the character of that person who experienced those things, and also the vulnerability and the resilience of being the other while trying to find one's place in the world. And so that's sort of how Living Color and Rubio stories came about, taking certain incidents from things that I remembered, either things that happened directly to me or things that I observed happening to other people. And so for me, creating stories using my personal experience comes down to how effective I am at keeping myself off the page. So that when I'm writing a person named Angie, or a person named Julia or Ophelia or Norma, but not Donna per se. I feel like I've created a character who is not me, and so that everything that happens on the page is happening to this other person.
Thank you, Donna. That's amazing to hear. I do a little bit less of that. On the enemy side, there is very little of me in the characters. There is like thematic connections. When I was growing up in Iran, my family is from a religious minority, so my entire life we were running from city to city so that we would stay safe. And the sense that I heard in one of, I've been told that it's sometimes frustrating to the reader that Hessam is so like out of his element in the city that he finds himself in Ahvaz. I'm like, that's how I felt most of my life, because as soon as I get used to one locality and one sets of local traditions, we are uprooted and moved to another city where I'm the stranger again. And he's from like a non-believer, upper middle class, like just came back from abroad, going to a complete different part of the country, hanging out with kind of working class, more Muslim leaning population. So of course he's going to find himself as a stranger. It's going to be hard for him to connect, particularly at the very beginning, to what's going on around him. But other than that, a lot of the specifics, a lot of the events, the way that I dealt with keeping them relatable and kind of having that real life experience is by relying on real events and real things that happened. So most of the side events of the story are true. Like I have newspaper clippings, I've read like prison memoirs. So like that's the way that I try to keep it real in a way that it can connect to the reader, and they can, even though they cannot like be in the protagonist position, they can kind of feel the craziness that was happening at the time, and connect with the characters that way.
All right, so maybe for this question, I'll talk about our writing process in our lives. With Busy Ain't the Half of It, then Chaz can, can wind up with the In Case You Forgot pieces in terms of our lives and connection. So with Busy Ain't the Half of It, it focuses on an uncle and a nephew who are Black and queer and in Los Angeles. And I would have to say that's where the similarities kind of stop. Black, queer, Los Angeles based. However, for the characters in this novel, family, found family, the networks that we create play a big part in the development of the story and Busy Ain't the Half of It. And I would say that those are some elements that resonate and connect with Chaz's and my life as Black and queer people in LA. What I will say that is not like us at all. Well, maybe it kind of is. The main character Justin is a long-term TV journalist who is on their way out, being kicked out of the business. Neither one of us is a journalist. Neither one of us so far, knock on wood, is in danger of being kicked out of our industry. One of the other main characters is an actor who is on their way up in the industry. And well, we can be a little dramatic, but neither one of us is an actor per se. And so those are some similarities and some differences that we drew upon. But I would definitely say that the family piece, because for many Black and queer people that I know and that we know, we often don't drift far away from home, or, we keep our family networks and friend networks and found family networks together. So that's a little bit about what we drew upon for Busy Ain't the Half of It, but Chaz can share a little bit more about In Case You Forgot, which was our first novel we wrote together.
Yeah, and I would also add that, like Hamour said, there are thematic things that we pull from in our writing, in our fiction writing. And one of those things that are thematic, we like to honor kind of how our world is shaped. So, like the identities you will see in our novels is kind of similar to the identities in our personal lives. When we're talking about race and gender and sexualities, we kind of like to acknowledge and give winks to the close people in our lives. And so I love like sprinkling in little trinkets or little artifacts that's like giving a nod to realness to my life. And so in our first novel, In Case You Forgot, the foundation was similar to the things that we personally experienced. Some of the foundations were one of the characters was going through a divorce. One of us had that experience in our life, and it wasn't Fred. Um, Another foundation was it was me. I went through a divorce. Another foundation was characters experience parental loss. And so we both have that experience. And so the foundation, the thematics showed up in our writing, in case you forgot. But we do enjoy putting writing like completely separate from our lives and doing acknowledging the realness in our personal life with like giving winks and nods through thematic ways.
Awesome. That was really interesting. Thank you. So another aspect of contemporary fiction that I was kind of thinking about a lot is I was kind of toying with the idea that, to me, contemporary fiction, when you're reading about real life characters, I feel like there's almost like an opposition kind of happening for readers, where sometimes a reader will pick up a book and like connect to the characters and see themselves so clearly, and that is an incredibly beautiful experience. And then on the flip side, there is also the experience where somebody can pick up a book and read about somebody who's completely different from them, and experience their lives and kind of like step into that and, be able to learn about somebody's experience that is, something that they've never been through and will never know firsthand. But reading that book is a way to kind of get a glimpse of what somebody's life might be like. And I think that both of these experiences are very necessary. And it's something that I think is like one of the beautiful things about literature is that we can experience both of these things and kind of reach readers differently. And I wanted to know if that was something kind of you thought about while you were writing and what like your goal is as a writer, to kind of get what I'm saying, like what you would love to do for readers and maybe how you find the balance between those two different experiences, how they're kind of two sides to the same coin. And I mean, also even your thoughts like as a reader as well, because I think that reading and writing kind of go hand in hand, how that has kind of shaped your experience as a writer, being on the other side of things.
Well, when I'm writing, I'm not thinking yet about readers. I'm focused on the characters and the story that's evolving from the needs and wants and the actions of those characters. And I think that readers will always bring their own experiences to the book they're reading. And so they may come away with an experience that I never intended to convey, or they may attribute an intention to the author that never existed in the author's mind. So those are things that are out of my control as a writer. Then on the other hand, I think many readers do connect with my characters, whether they are similar to them or completely different from them. And this is a response I'm most aware of whenever I encounter readers through reviews or online or in face-to-face encounters. And this has been the case especially with Living Color, because who hasn't at some point while they were growing up said the wrong thing or made the wrong decision or been humiliated or felt othered in some way? Most of us have. And so I think that's how come they can identify with Angie Rubio. But there's an added dimension to the incidents Angie experiences, and that is the color of her skin. And so I hope that readers will see that this element is the crux of Angie's experience, how she is seen by others, how she is made to see herself, and how she has to rise above these preconceived notions and the stereotypes and her own internalized racism. So these are the things, in the end, these are the things that I hope readers understand. And from the feedback I've gotten, I think that has been the case. So I'm really happy about that in terms of this reader-writer connection with Living Color.
Thanks, Donna. I kind of feel the same way. When I was writing this book, I just wanted to tell the story in a way that does it justice. I knew that, like, to most readers, it's going to seem unfamiliar, like something that they would like the exact circumstances are quite unusual. Like, even if you are Iranian living in Iran, living in that part of the country, the circumstances are very unusual, and that's one of the reasons that I got attracted to the story in the first place. The portions of it that are based on reality. But I think for me as an author, one of the things that I work and strive to achieve is to bridge that gap, so that if the reader cannot see themselves in the characters, they can still understand why the character is behaving in a certain way, and why they're doing certain things, and like why they are, acting stupidly or smartly at times. and I think like the ultimate goal is to be able to create empathy, to connect to people who are not like you. In a lot of places and spaces, like I'm always the outsider. So I like one of the things I wanted to express is that I mean it's a cliche that we have a lot in common, but I kind of want to build that bridge. I think, and like one of the things that was important to me again in telling the truth about it is that the way that media, particularly American media, portray Iranians, it's very one-sided. Like religious fanatics who have no free thinking, no agency of their own, and they're just blindly following the leaders. And that is just not true. So I wanted to show some of the complexities, some of the diversities in terms of ethnic groups, in terms of languages, in terms of religious minorities. So I wanted to show that and hope that the reader can kind of understand the truth about Iran a little bit better and be able to connect to the characters in that way.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Donna and Hamour were sharing around empathy, being able to open up worlds and visions and see people who share a sense of humanity, even if their lived experiences with race, racism, gender, sexism, heterosexism, etc., and develop that sense of empathy for communities that may or may not be like them. Oftentimes in my writing process, I'll tell you, I'm thinking about getting through that deadline because oftentimes we are having faced with lots of deadlines. So I'm often thinking about deadline, but then I also do think about value for readers because readers and people who buy our books, you know, they're investing $10, $12, $15. And we know that with the diversity of economic situations that people are in, it takes an investment and a choice. Do I want to purchase this book? So always thinking about value. But in terms of thinking about like that identifiability piece, that kind of connect with something that's in the written page, I'm always, this is really interesting. This could be its own panel itself. Sometimes like when I look at Goodreads reviews or NetGalley reviews or Amazon reviews, oftentimes I'll see things like, I don't think the story was meant for me, but, and then go on to say what they enjoyed or did not enjoy about the book. And when I see statements like that, I often ask myself, I didn't grow up seeing myself in Macbeth, in 1984, Of Mice and Men, or any of these other things that are considered classics that we're all kind of forced to read to see as good literature. And it often makes me think about this. So Toni Morrison, who passed away a few years ago, great documentary. And if you go on YouTube and look up some of Toni Morrison's interviews, there's one where she talks about, I wrote to center myself, and I dare the world to cross over and see me as the center. And I really resonate and connect with a lot of what Toni Morrison said about putting all of ourselves at the center and bringing the world in and daring the world to see us as the center, which is a flip in the way in which most readers, writers, people who are librarians kind of look at books and everything. So those are some things that come to mind when I think about writing, reading, how people say they can or cannot identify. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all love, we want food, we want to be accepted. And so I just think it's really interesting sometimes when I see and read and hear from readers who say, I don't think this book was meant for me. Then what is? And I will pass it over to Chaz and see what Chaz has to add on to this question.
Yeah, thank you. Freddie did a wonderful job again. And I'm glad you brought up Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison has helped to free many of us who write and who read. Her ideas of how to write definitely influences my way of writing, which is I first want to honor the story and the characters in the novel. That is my first goal. And honoring the identities of those characters. And I do little of thinking about how one may meet these characters or how one may interpret these characters. That isn't my primary goal. My primary goal is to feel like I'm telling the truth of these characters. And I do very little, or I try to do very little of the explanatory colon, which Toni also talks about. It's about explaining things for the outside group. I try not to do that a lot in my writing, if not at all. And if you are a part of the group who understands it, then that's a wink and that's an acknowledgement. But if you're not, then that is the work on you to research it. Because again, my primary goal is to honor the truth of the folks in the novel and to see what they can bring to all of us, because it's all gifts. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really, really fascinating. So we are going to do a little shift away from questions that are more broad for everybody. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the 3 individual books that we're here to, talk about and promote today. So I have questions for all of you guys individually. And I think we probably will have time to take questions. If anyone watching wants to throw a question in the chat, I would love that. So let us know if you have any questions for our authors here, because these answers have been very interesting so far. So I think you're going to want to hear what they have to say. But let's start out with you, Donna. So your book is about this character named Angie Rubio, and it's kind of almost like short stories. It's follows her throughout so much of her life, and you get these glimpses of different points of her adolescence, basically like from kindergarten all the way through high school. And I feel like her story in a lot of ways was very kind of shaped by the time period that it was set in. So I wanted to kind of think about that. And I was wondering if you kind of envision Angie as an adult today and kind of what you would imagine her life to be like. And then I also was very curious if you had any thoughts about how her story might be the same or different if she had grown up as like a teenager now, like if Angie was like a Gen Z, fresh out of high school teenager, what her story might be like.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. So Angie grew up in the 60s and 70s, as I did. So it was easy for me to write about her in that time period. And I think that many of the things that Angie experienced growing up in the 60s and 70s resonate today with readers. Certainly with those who grew up in that time period, but also those who, are teenagers now, we're young adults now. And I have been asked by other readers if I'm considering writing about Angie as an adult in the present day. And I have mulled that one over, and I'm thinking that it could be a future project, but I haven't thought it through enough to think about what she would be like today, because so much can happen over a lifetime that can radically change a person. And so I would have to think about what has transpired since the end of Living Color. And if Angie were a teenager today, if I were to write her as a contemporary teenager, I'm pretty sure she would be more sophisticated in her thinking, more self-aware, more assertive than Angie was growing up in the 60s and 70s. I just think kids today are just, as I said, more self-aware. They're just smarter. And this sort of goes back to the earlier question about if we write from our own experiences. And because I knew what it was like to grow up as a teen, in the 60s and 70s, it was easy for me to think about that and to create this character. If I were to do a character growing up today, that would require more research. And I think it would be a different kind of challenge, certainly because the world we live in today, it has so many different challenges. And for me, I'm thinking about this too, because I have a grandson now who's growing up during this pandemic. And thinking about what the world is going to be like and what kind of challenges they face. And I think about growing up in the 60s and 70s and the kinds of scary things that were happening then. And I think things are much scarier now. And I think that would really change the character if I were writing her today. But I think it's necessary. I think somebody out there is writing it. And recently I reviewed a book by Zach. It's like his name is escaping me now, but he wrote a YA book about contemporary teenagers, which I thought was really great because it captured so many things. And I think it was, so he's done it. It's been done. And I think I would like people to read his book, Zamora. Wait. I'll remember the name before the end of this session, so I can let you know. But so that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to Hamour, your book, I know you spent years writing it and researching it, and it's such a difficult and heavy topic. And I was hoping that you would talk a little bit about kind of how you took care of yourself throughout that process and how you took care of your mental health, and potentially like advice you have for somebody who wants to take on a similar project, something that might help somebody that helped you. And then also in knowing that your story that you are sharing is, inspired by actual people and actual lives. I feel like that is, in a sense, kind of a burden almost that, is something not to take lightly. And I, just wanted to hear more about how you carried that and, the steps that you took to make sure that, the story was told correctly and that it felt, right for the readers to hear what you were saying.
Yeah, thank you. What triggered this entire book was when I was working at a human rights organization that documented human rights violation in Iran. And one of the first cases I came across was something I thought I knew a lot, right? One of the first cases I worked on was about this young man who was a medical student in Rome. And he was a supporter of a socialist group, the largest socialist organization in Iran. And a few years after the revolution, he comes back because he wants to serve his country and be part of this super exciting thing that just remove the monarchy. And there was hope maybe at the time. And he joins the Revolutionary Guards Corps. But he's still a sympathizer of that socialist organization. And the authorities think that he's an infiltrator and is in the Corps to spy on them. He gets arrested and he dies shortly after his arrest in custody. That story broke my heart so much because he was part of this. I'm sorry, I should have said that the socialist organization supported the government. And I was so heartbroken that this guy supported this group who supported the government. But just the fact that he had the wrong ideology in supporting the government meant that he couldn't live. So that's why I kind of like the mission statement for this book was that I wanted to restore his dignity and his humanity. So I learned a tiny bit about him that I could. I kept some of the background information about him as the backstory of the character Hassam. But then I changed everything else. Like statistically speaking, there's a 90% chance that the real person was heterosexual. So I thought like by changing that into a gay character, I'm already like breaking from reality so that I don't have to, it's still fiction, right? I'm still creating this plot that did not exist in reality. And then I also changed the time frame. Things got much, much worse in 1981 in Iranian prisons. So much so that I could hardly read about them, much less write about them. And the gruesomeness of what happened later on forced me to change the timeline of the book to start and finish before things got really bad. And then I wanted the story to end at the time where Iraq invades Iran, and that would create the chaotic situation in which the ending becomes possible. But then I couldn't keep the prisoner imprisoned for that long. I'm like, I just don't have the heart to keep him there for this, like for so many months, because the beginning point should be this thing that triggers Hessam to come back to Iran. And I don't want to keep Bahram in prison from like April to September. So then I had to research more and find another trigger that created chaos that makes the ending possible. So I worked to answer your other question about how to maintain mental health when there is so much awful things that I had to research to write the book. When I started working at that human rights organization, I quickly learned that I cannot talk about my job. Like if there is a happy hour and people are asking, hey, what do you do? Like answer the question and immediately like pivot to something else because the topic are just way too heavy. And I don't want to, I like to distance myself from the work. I had to like take active steps and create that distance. And something I created a habit since then was to like watch something, like watch some comedy of some sort before going to bed, so that when I'm sleeping, like I have a change of like there's a switch in my mind that I'm now thinking about something else. So like I watch The Fresh Prince before going to bed, or I watch the Ellen DeGeneres show, or I watch right now I'm watching Will and Grace reruns. Like I tape them and like before going to bed, I'm like, I want something light. There's a lot of bad things that we hear about during the day, but before going to bed, I just need to tone it down a little bit. So I hope that answered your question. Thank you. It was a very thoughtful question.
Yeah, definitely answers my question. Thank you. I love how much like empathy you have for your character. So my last question is about Chaz and Fred's book, which is obviously co-written for the two of you. And you guys had already written a book together. And I think that like the idea of writing a book with somebody is honestly such a cool relationship to me. And it sounds extremely difficult. And I am really curious about your working relationship and your process in writing. And you know, whether the book you did before kind of just paved the way and this one was easier, or if it presented new challenges for you guys. And then I also really loved about your book that the characters kind of become very interwoven, and there's a large cast of characters that like you see them pop up and you realize that they're all more connected than you initially realized. And it's a dual perspective book, so we have kind of two protagonists. And I think that a lot of people, when they read dual perspective books that are written by two people, kind of the first question you have is, did one kind of take over one character and the other person take over the other character? So I am very curious if it was kind of co-written for both, or if you guys kind of split up and took the reins on certain characters and perspectives.
All right, so don't believe the hype. This is all love, just for the camera. We hate each other. Just joking. No, no. Chaz and I have had a personal and professional relationship for well over 10 years. And that friendship and professional work as colleagues just really developed into a seamless writing process for us. Thank goodness for the cloud, where we, whether we're in the same city or in different cities, could continue writing with each other. What I really appreciated for the first book, and Chaz can talk about this new one, is for In Case You Forgot, we started out together. We both were living in the LA area. We would meet out on Saturdays at the West Hollywood Library, rent one of those study rooms and write for a few hours before going out to Santa Monica Boulevard. And then, and so that was very seamless, organic. It just flowed. With the second novel, Busy Ain't the Half of It, Chaz, you want to talk a little bit more about how we kind of changed up the writing process?
Yeah, but in both of the novels, so we took lead on, both of our novels followed two characters, the lives of two characters. And so we took lead on one of the characters each. And taking lead means that we start off in the mindset of that character and we set it up. We have lead on setting it up. And then as we continue to write, then we provide our feedback with what we think the character is doing or where it can go. But we both have a lead on a character in that character's world. And then in the second novel, where the pandemic kind of shaped how we worked together, we didn't. We were both living in the same city. I move around a lot, I travel a lot, so the cloud is our best friend. And so when we were writing the second novel, we were living in San Francisco at the same time, but we didn't meet up because we were writing during the pandemic. That was one difference. And we outlined this novel for the most part. The first novel, In Case You Forgot, we didn't outline. We just let the word lead us. That was Fred's style for his first three novels. Well, his first four novels, including In Case You Forgot. But then Busy Ain't the Half of It. Life was a little bit different for us, and I suggested that we outline so we could meet our deadline on time. And so it worked. And that was the major difference of outlining and adding plots that we needed to think about months in advance. And we wrote to our ideas. Do you want to add anything else, Fred? But it's been a joy writing with Fred, and our arguments, we like to tell people when we disagree on an idea, we have to just vogue it out, and whoever has the best vogue wins the argument. Boom. Just kidding.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add to that.
Awesome. So that's most of the questions that I have today. We are pretty close to the end. We have a little bit more time, but thankfully we did a pretty good job filling up our slot here. I wanted to kind of end with just a fun little question, because I feel like everybody just loves getting book recommendations. So I feel like every time I go to a festival, like a book panel or something, every time the authors recommend books, I'm always scrambling to write them down. So I just think it would be very fun if you guys shared a book that you recommend that you've read recently in the contemporary genre, because I'm sure people would love to hear that.
As I think about a book, I'm looking at I just opened the chat and there's a lot happening in the chat. It's really funny. Oh, I just read every time one of us says, in case you forgot, they think they forgot something. Okay, I'm thinking about the book.
Oh, wow. I just looked at it too. Wow. So I just want to, I mentioned earlier a book that I had reviewed. It was a YA book, although my book isn't YA. And I was thinking about what Hamour said earlier about whether his book was YA or not, just because it had a young character. And that's an interesting discussion, that is beside the point here. But the book that I was mentioning was by R. Zamora Lindmark, and it's called the, gosh, I just had it up here. The importance of being wild at heart. So it's a YA book, but it's a really interesting premise. It has really smart characters, and so I would recommend that. But also, I recently read Leslie Tenorio's The Son of Good Fortune, which I loved. I love his work. He's a Filipino-American writer, although he's an American writer of Filipino descent, and his characters are amazing. And also, I recently read, finally got around to reading Carmen Maria Machado's memoir, In the Dream House, which is fabulous. And I'm sure a lot of people have read that already too. And I'm also excited to read the books by my co-panelists because they sound amazing. And this is one of the things I love about being part of these conferences, getting to finding out about other writers and other books. So I'm eager to read your books.
All right. So, of course, I'm reading my own as a reader, not as a writer, but I'm reading Katrina Jackson's Office Hours. And Katrina Jackson will be a panelist at the virtual Indie Book Fest this weekend. And so it's a romance, office romance, takes place on a university campus. That means it's going to be a little bit hot.
Nice. Thank you so much. One of the books that I've read recently that I absolutely loved is called The Removed by Brandon Hobson. And it's about a Native American family who lose one of their sons to police brutality. And at the very beginning, so I'm not spoiling anything. And the rest of the book deals with how the family dealt with that. And it has elements of mysticism, of the supernatural. And I am just so happy to have found it randomly on a Bookstagram page. It's an absolutely wonderful book. I highly recommend it.
A book that I completed recently, a chat book, is called You're the Only Friend I Need by Alejandro Herreria. And it's 4 stories, 4 small stories that follow different Black, queer, Dominican characters looking at friendships. And so, and it's like a small publishing company. So yeah, You're the Only Friend that I Need.
Thank you. I just love hearing book recommendations from authors. So thanks for indulging me. But of course, I need to reiterate that the main book recommendations that everybody watching needs to think about today is your books, because truly, I think that all 3 of your books that we talked about today were so different from each other, and they brought something completely unique to the table. And I really appreciated all 3 of them. And I want to thank you guys for being here. This was lovely. All of you had incredible things to say. This was really great. And thank you to Paula for hosting and organizing this entire event. This was only the first panel. The next one after this is going to be, I believe, a Black romance panel hosted by Whitney. So that's going to be amazing. Everybody should make sure to go on over there next. And yeah, round of applause to you guys. Truly, thank you so much for being here. This was really, really lovely. If you guys want to plug any socials or just reiterate anything that you've already said, you can feel free to do so. No worries. Oh, you got it.
FrederickLSmith.com.
I have a very unusual name, so if you Google Hamour Baika, you'll find all of my socials. They're all Hamour Baika.
DonnaMiscolta.com.
ChazCruz.com or CHZ Cruz on Instagram and Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody give these guys a look and check out their books. And I think that's it. So thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you guys at the next panel. Thank you guys.